And welcome, everyone.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar titled Solve Shortages for the Long-Term Funding and Retention Strategies That Work. Our conversation today is facilitated by Christy Jackson, Senior Learning Strategist with Bloom Board. And joining her, we have Shannon Allman, Director of Human Resources and Finance with Madison Consolidated Schools, and Susan Fumo, Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources with Freeport School District 145. Today's webinar will include approximately 45 to 50 minutes of presentation and conversation, followed by 10 to 15 minutes of questions and answers. As questions arise during today's webinar, please enter them into the chat box. This webinar is also being sponsored by Bloom Board and provided at no charge for ASPA members and non-members. The webinar is being recorded, and a copy of the recording will be available for future review under the resources section of aspa.org. This webinar has also been approved by SHRM, HRCI, and PHCLE for 1 hour of recertification credit. Each participant will receive certification information via email and upon request. To receive credit for attending today's webinar, please make sure that your full name is listed in the Zoom. With that, welcome Christy, Shannon, and Susan, and thank you for being here today.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Emily and Shannon and Susan. Thank you so much for being a part of the call today. If you would each just take a moment to, I know we see your name and your role here, but if you could just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself and your district before we get into our questions, I would love that. Shannon, you want to go ahead and start?
Sure. My name's Shannon Allman. I've been with Madison Consolidated Schools about 3 years, but had came from another district where I worked for about 5. So not new to the HR field. Madison is a absolutely lovely community. We have about 2,400 students, about 550 staff persons. So have a kind of a smaller rural school feel here. Still have all of the same challenges that have at a lot of districts with the teacher shortage, and Madison has certainly seen its fair share of those kinds of things. But that's kind of our district area.
Thank you so much, Shannon and Susan.
Hi, Christy. I'm Susan Fumo. I'm the Assistant Superintendent of HR in Freeport. We're in the northwest corner of Illinois. We're 3,800 kids, 700 staff. We were hit hard by the teacher shortage because we are an urban-esque community in a rural part of the state. So people who are interested in teaching in urban areas tend to gravitate to Chicago. And people who want to teach in a more rural or small school district go to our little farming communities around us. So when I came to the district 3 years ago, we had 35 empty classrooms. So it was a big challenge. I was brand new to HR. I came up through the education space, through the classrooms and principalships and teacher leadership. And so it has been a big learning curve for me. And I've really been appreciative of all of the university and other partners like Bloom Board who've helped us develop a teacher pipeline of now 30 non-certified staff who are on their way to being certified.
Well, thank you both so much for sharing a little bit more. I love having the opportunity to talk to our district partners. That's where my heart is. As a senior learning strategist at Bloom Board, I get to work with amazing district leaders and university leaders across the nation. But I come to this work after implementing Bloom Board pathways in my district, in a large district here in the Phoenix, Arizona area, for about 3 years before coming over. We were in a very similar space. We had 19 elementary schools, 4 comprehensive high schools, and had multiple grade levels across our buildings that had no certified teachers on a whole grade level. And so we were definitely seeking out pathways. And so having the opportunity to implement these pathways in my district is what drove me to want to support more to be able to do that. So all of you that are on the call, I see a lot of head nodding. I think that we are all in, somewhat see ourselves in all 3 of these stories in some capacity. So ladies, I'm so glad to have you on the call today so that we can talk a little bit about kind of what brought you to this space and what you're doing in both of your areas, such phenomenal things to address that shortage. So Susan, you started a little bit by telling us some of the challenges that you were seeing in that teacher pipeline that led you to explore this kind of on-the-job degree or certification model. Can you talk to us a little bit more about about that and why, we know you had some openings. Why did you think this type of a model might be best for your district?
Freeport is a very close-knit community with a strong sense of belonging and a strong sense of pride. Our mascot is the pretzels, which is very unique and unusual. It's after some Bavarian bakers. Right when you get to Freeport, you have to learn how to make the pretzel symbol. And you're immediately almost, Christy.
I
You're
know, I'm
immediately
trying. I've been here for years.
indoctrinated.
I don't quite get there yet.
You're immediately indoctrinated into pretzel world. People have pretzel tattoos. Like it's a big thing. And so I'm from a community about 30 miles to the east, in Rockford, and I loved this identity and this sense of joy. And so I figured out pretty quickly that we could lean into people who were invested in the community, who want to be here, who grew up here, who have boomeranged back here, and are figuring out that the school district is really the glue that holds this community together. People take a lot of pride in working for the school district. And so investing in those kind of people who wanted to be attached to the school district, but maybe didn't necessarily have a Pell or hadn't even thought about teaching as a first choice career, was just seemed like a natural place to start investing. And so it was pretty easy to get off the ground because those are the people we want.
Absolutely. Those people that love that community, that's something you can't teach, right? You can't bring someone in and teach that sort of what makes you passionate for these families and this community. So Shannon, talk to us a little bit about where were you all as a district that brought this about?
So when I came here, it's similar, not on the largest scale as Susan was just sharing, but similarly, we had teaching positions that had been open year after year. And simply all the staff, it was all hands on decks. We were having burnout because teachers were having to cover other teachers. We were paying for prep periods, like trying to get subs. It was just kind of this whole rat race that we were involved in. And similarly, Madison is a very tight-knit community as well. It's Jefferson County, it's south, the south of Indiana. So we're down in the southern area along the Ohio River, just for some geographical perspective. But the same thing, right? They're very tight knit, and we already knew we had a lot of good ISPs, our instructional support persons or paraprofessionals, whatever you may call them. We knew we had a lot of really good people that were coming to work every day, and we're always asking, "Can I make any more money? Is there a way for me to make more money?" And they have the desire to work. They're coming, and so it just seemed like kind of a no-brainer for us to invest in those individuals instead of investing in people that were leaving and just paying that turnover cost, that we would put the money in a more proactive way and pay, get them to sign agreements, so that we get them for, 5 years afterwards or whatever you want to make it look like, but getting them in on the front end, investing in them, because then they feel more, included. And, we've had 2 recent graduates. So we've got 2 people that went through the program that are teaching for us right now. So we're already starting to see the fruits of that labor. And now they're our biggest spokesperson on marketing, recruitment, retention. It hit everything. So it was kind of like, how do you want to hit all your strategic goals in one foul swoop? Well, right here it is.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. It makes me have goosebumps every time I hear that, Shannon. I know I was just talking to, we had a webinar yesterday for some of our Oklahoma participants, and one of our graduates was on, and she was talking about how now she's a couple of years out of graduating, and she's now the lead on her grade level. And she was talking about how, before she was scared to stay in that grade level because she was a para and there weren't any certified teachers, and that now she's keeping her grade level by leading it. It was like, oh my gosh, this is the most amazing piece. So obviously choosing the right participants is important in this, and you both spoke to that. Shannon, can you kind of just expand, when you launched the program, I know at first sometimes it's hard to convince people, and then like you said, then they become the greatest spokesperson. So how did you identify the right staff members for this, and kind of what was that process?
So we did a couple of seminar, like Bloom Board did a couple of Learn series, right? So we shared that out and kind of shared it out with staff and invited people to participate. Of course, you kind of do the tap on the shoulder for those who you really feel like are going to be great, right? I will say initially I didn't have the best, hindsight's 2020 in anything you do, right? So initially I kind of just had 8 participants that were wanting to do it. So we're like, we're going to allow them to do it. Now I do things a little differently because nothing's 100%. There's lessons learned every time, and I've learned a couple of those. Now my process is you have to be employed by the school district for 1 full year. You have to have good attendance. You have to have your principals, kind of a letter of recommendation. And, I also meet with them, and then I just kind of review everything that Bloom Board did, but I kind of go over it again and remind them, you're going to pay us back if you don't do these things. So initially it was a more lax kind of process. Now we funded initially 10 slots. So we have one slot remaining open. And so I've got 2 applicants for that slot right now. And so I've got principals coming to advocate, and then we'll do an interview with each of those applicants to see. And we may end up funding both. We don't know, but it's that whole lessons learned, right? And there's going to be some, and it's going to be different for every district.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much. I think that's what we would love to be able to share with, new districts coming on are, those lessons that we learn as we start to do it. And I think you're right. There's a lot of initial thoughts around, who just wants to do it? We're so excited that someone wants to be a teacher with us, right? And so, you mentioned something that I want to kind of ask Susan to expand on too. So Susan, I know that we've had a lot of conversations around mentors and sort of principal recommendations and support, because this program does require administrators to, sort of know that their participants are engaging in this. They're gathering artifacts of practice. And so our participants, we don't necessarily believe that writing a 10-page paper about teaching a small group makes you a great small group teacher, but I would love to see a 10-minute video of you teaching a small group. So that's how our program is aligned, right? And I see you both shaking your head. And so that does take a little bit of coordination for administrators and for mentors to know. So talk to us a little bit, Susan, and, in your selection process of candidates and getting the word out within your district, what did that sort of look like?
I'll back up just a little bit because we have 4 right now, an umbrella with 4 pathways to become a certified teacher in it. And so we did a broad cast of the net in the first year, which was 2, not last year, but the school year before that. We just had an interest form, and we probably got 40 people who filled out the interest form. And then every step of the way, I would put some responsibility back on the applicant. So after they filled out the interest form, I sent everyone an email and offered like an information session, and then they had to sign up and they had to attend the information session. So that was another layer of we kind of weed out, for lack of a better term. And then after that, they had to self-schedule on my calendar a 15-minute screener call with me. So we lost a couple more who just never scheduled the screener call. So that was kind of a way we funneled from our original very large interest pool. And then when we met with them, we explained the different ways that they could, get into our Grow RN program. We do partner with a regional university. So if people who really want to do that traditional classes in person can do classes there. We have a few people in that. We have 2 online, just complete traditional online universities with kind of different class scheduling patterns. So people pick the thing that works best for their schedule. And then we're able to add the Bloom Board option. And so it was, by the time people had done those different steps, it was pretty easy to see which of the candidates were going to be a good fit for Bloom Board. And we have 3 people who already had their associate's degree, and then 1 person who needed the bachelor's all the way. And it's just been a really good fit. And then we met with the principals right away. They understood what the program entailed and what was required. And they were thrilled to have, additional people in the classroom doing this embedded work in the classroom with students. So that was a very easy sell. We also have a service agreement, like Shannon described, that if they don't finish the program, they have to pay us back. And we do an annual check-in right about this time of year with all 30 of our Grow Our Own and just review with them. Here's how many classes we've paid for you. Here's how many you have left. Here's a reminder of your commitment to us. And then we also meet with each principal and say, these are the people in your school who are in this program. These are the people in Bloom Board, just to remind them like continually, hey, here's what you're getting out of this at the end. You're going to get these teachers. So
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, well, thank you so much. I really think, Shannon and Susan, you described some really thoughtful practices around how you kind of bring in your administrators and that. And I'm sure that at this point, there's a lot of folks on the call that were like, that sounds fantastic. I can do all of that. How do you pay for this? Right. And so, Susan, I know since we're talking with you, I know that funding is always a big question. And you mentioned, sort of layering this in to your existing Grow Your Own program. So we actually have quite a few districts that we work with that do that because, we want to find the best match for the best program for the participants that are going to come in. So I know when you first started speaking with us in your district, you had to kind of think through that. So can you talk to us a little bit about, how did you decide to be able to, kind of fund the program? What partnerships or additional funding structures has your district been able to kind of work with to be able to make this more sustainable for Freeport?
So we're in the third year of an Illinois teacher vacancy grant. And because we had so many openings in the fall of 23, we received quite a generous amount from that grant. It was about $400,000. And we ended up using a third to a half of it for a Grow Our Own program in the first 2 years. And this year we are fully using half of it. Because we want to get as many people through this pipeline before the grant money runs out. Now, with that said, we have recognized the value of having this funding allocated to continue this Grow Our Own program indefinitely moving forward. And mercifully, I hope we never need 30 teachers all at the same time ever again. So right now we're trying to figure out what is a good amount so we get a strong return on investment of allocating that in our regular budget. And I think we're coming up with we want to have 5 or 6 a year, just kind of embedded for the size of our district and the needs that we see ongoing. Additionally, Bloom Board was amazing in getting in touch with our local Workforce Connection organization, and the Workforce Connection this year has agreed to fully fund our Bloom Board candidates because they qualify under state of Illinois code for apprenticeship programs. And our regional Workforce Connection organization had some untouched grant funding, and they allocated it all to us. I guess no one else was asking for it at the time. So that has been a huge blessing, and we're going to solidify that relationship moving forward so that it's more predictable and we understand what they're going to be able to fund for us year to year.
Absolutely. I think, that's such a huge thing. I'm glad you shared that part too as well, Susan. I think one of the things that we try to do when we partner with the district to start with is, Bloom Board is full of educators and district leaders. And we know one of the hardest, it's great to be able to bring something in, but you definitely, if it's working for you, how do we create sustainable funding structures for that, right? And we also all know that education funding is all up in the air, especially in these times, right? So how can we lean into funding that is also supportive of building workforces and some of those other structures? And that's one of our biggest goals, is to continue both through our university partners and our district partners to find different ways that we can do that, even using existing funding structures that maybe you might allocate slightly differently. I know we've had some of our districts look at things like tuition reimbursement and continue, to instead apply that upfront to support some of the funding structures here. And so Shannon, I know totally different state, different, opportunities for funding. Talk to us a little bit about how you all are thinking about that.
So it was a little different for us. Whenever I had came here, they were doing tuition reimbursement, and it was for various things, right? There didn't seem to be any rhyme or reason. It was like, depending on the day you come in, right? I mean, I'm not being flippant, but a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So it was just like putting some parameters around that and deciding what is important for us. And it was important to grow our own so that we could retain them, and then also like be a district where we could recruit based on that. So people would want to come here to work because we invest in our employees, because that is ultimately the most important, resource that we have. So I think it was just a shift in thinking, and it's part of our strategic plan. Dr. Brown was very instrumental because she's like, recruitment and retention, that is one of the pillars of our strategic plan. So our district was all on board, everyone aligned. And then it was just a matter of like the cost analysis, right? Like, I'm sorry. It was like, how much money are we spending on turnover? And
Yes.
burnout and missed days of work because there isn't enough people. And we're making this teacher do two things instead of one job. So it was looking at all those things and then making the decision that our money was going to be spent more proactively.
Yeah,
I'm going to grab a
absolutely.
drink. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, no, please go ahead. And I know one of the things that that we've even talked about with districts is, looking at if you've allocated funding for a full-time teacher, right? And we are not able to staff that, we have to allocate that funding at whatever, a base teacher salary would be. And so if we're hiring someone as a long-term sub, maybe into that position, there's going to be that price difference between what we're paying annually for the long-term sub and what we would have been paying for a first year teacher. So what is that difference that already sits in our budget, right? And how much of that can we maybe
Yes.
apply, reallocate for tuition for that, right? And Susan, I want to come back to you. You mentioned something earlier that kind of made me think of something. So I know you mentioned workforce funding and the opportunity to engage with that. I know that there are some members in our team and some local folks that kind of try to set some of those pieces up. Can you talk a little bit about like what was prepared for you or what you needed to kind of get ready for those connections with your workforce funding in that piece?
Honestly, we as a district did absolutely nothing. I mean, everything there, Bloom Board had someone who reached out they knew our local workforce connection contact. They did all of it. There were a few emails that went, and the next day my HRG and I were just like, this was the best email we ever got. We just kind of, after watching these emails go back and forth from Bloom Board and Workforce Connections was like, we can fully fund this program for this year for all 4 people. I mean, it was miraculous.
I thought that had been the process. So, for me, again, on our side, I don't think any of us as educators as much speak workforce board ease
Yeah.
or any of those things.
I didn't
right?
know it was a thing that existed.
Right. And so I think, that is something that we have definitely tried to create in our different states that have those availabilities is trying to make the connection. I think you said something, Susan, that, a lot of our workforce boards don't realize that they don't think about education in that way. And it's, I've never seen a conversation happen where even if there's not available funds now, that eyes were not opened to sort of what you all do in human resources in the school district, right? A lot of times they just, oh, it's a school district. Well, no, we're upskilling our employees, we're investing in them. We spend money to professionally develop them. We let them grow along the continuum of our profession. And I think a lot of times we're not thought of that way. So even if a conversation hasn't been had or there's not available funds, every state and district area has some sort of a workforce board or an organization that's trying to support that. So having those conversations and letting us, help you bridge those connections and form those relationships can only benefit your district and your community going forward. And so I'm so glad to hear that process was easy for you. And it's definitely what our goal is in supporting that. So I know, Susan, you mentioned, being at the end of the 3-year grant, having that opportunity to create that and, those structures that you're trying to make internally, can really be powerful. So you can create that sustainable model there. So excellent. Well, let's talk a little bit more about getting that approval process through. So I know sometimes we see an amazing idea and opportunity as HR leaders or as district leaders, but we're not the only ones who have to kind of understand that process and do that. So Shannon, can you talk to us a little bit about how did you, once you kind of saw that this might be an opportunity and there was some of those existing structures to kind of corral those into maybe a more, purposeful pathway, what was that process internally in your district leadership to kind of build in that buy-in?
It was a conversation. Obviously, Dr. Brown was on board and instrumental in the whole process, but it was a conversation with our leadership team here at the district level and kind of talking through what that might look like. And that it was a front end investment, right? It was going to take at least a couple years for us to see the results of any of it. And that it would require us to kind of really look at our other systems to say, are they also where they need to be to support this? And it really helped us take a look at our mentor program that we already had in place that really wasn't fully developed. And then it also led us to create, not only refine and make our mentor program better because we were going to support this process, but also look at new teacher orientation and how we do our new teacher onboarding. So now we do new teacher sessions. So we've been doing it for 2 years to be supportive on that front end, right? For our
Yes.
current teachers that we have. So we have 8 sessions every year where we're just working one-on-one, one time a month with all those new teachers, bringing them together, making sure that they have a group, a cohort that they can rely on. So it was putting those processes in place because we knew we were going to have these new teachers coming out. And I thought the last thing we want to do is get them all the way through here and have them quit. So it was really looking at all of the things that were going to help promote it as well. So once we had kind of built that foundation, and it didn't take long once you get all the people there that you need to have there, right? The principals know what's going on. The superintendent's been doing this for a long time. And then it was really an easy sell to the board because, you know, you have yourself and you have a couple of those principals and you have a couple teachers come and talk about how great it would be if they weren't having to do all this stuff. And we had people that stayed. And it was pretty much an easy sell to get them on board because it's just a matter of where your priorities are. Do you want to fix problems or you want to create solutions for them so that you can use your efforts for something else? So
100%. It makes my teacher heart so happy to hear, there was teacher voices as a part of your process, and really trying to think of how do we create this sustainable model of support for our candidates along the way, and hearing that, that was what sort of helped your board see that return on investment, is really a huge piece there. So, well, now that I've heard, you say, Shannon, you've got 2 people already in teaching certified in your spaces, and I know you've got folks that are at that point. Talk to us a little bit about the impact you're seeing on your districts. We talked about, staffing, but how about, impact on students in the classroom, or what you're hearing about participants, about the experience, or principals? Just talk to us a little bit about what you're hearing with that.
So one of our applicants was a SPED. They went through the SPED program. So she's now a special ed teacher, which is, I know for most districts, is one of the hardest to fill. It was here as well. So she's at the high school, and I mean, the students love her. Her other staff members love her. She's a rock star. And she's one of those quiet kind of behind the scenes kind of people that make things happen, that has the heart to work with individuals that need extra help. And she actually came to talk about her experience and what she's done so far, and to see just the difference in her, the way she carries herself and her confidence level. And I mean, that's why I do what I do, right? Like at the end of the day, I don't get joy out of having to discipline people, right? Or do all the other elements of my job that aren't that much fun.
That's not
But
your
this
most
one
favorite
was.
part of your job, no?
Yeah, this one was fun, right? To see her stand up, and she actually presented at one of the superintendent meetings and got up and kind of told her story. And I thought, oh my gosh, like this has just changed like the rest of her life. Like it's changed it. And she said that. So to be a part of that, for in every way, right? Like from the students get her, her colleagues get her, and her family, they all get the best version of her. And we were part of that. You were part of that as at Bloom Board. So that's powerful, very powerful, right? Like it's those stories that really resonate, and it's true. She put in the work, she did it, but we get to be part of it, and the students get to reap the rewards of it, which is exactly what we wanted.
At one point, I had the opportunity to speak as a teacher of the year for the state of Arizona. And one of the things that experience taught me, visiting classrooms over and talking to families in a lot of our rural areas here in Arizona that had very similar experiences to you all, is that when we give the gift of education to our students, or in this case, our participants, it's not just a gift to them, right? It's a gift to their families. Like this is a life-changing salary change for a lot of our participants. Participants who are almost a large majority of our participants are first-time college graduates in their families. And it also is a gift to, not only their families, but to our communities and to our school as a whole, because the impact they will have on those families and on those students. And you mentioned earlier, both of you, the impact of having grade levels where you don't have veteran teachers. And so you're losing those other teachers that are veterans because they're the only ones picking up all of that slack. And so that gift, can you imagine the gift of having an amazing high school special education teacher? Like that's life-changing for not just her, but for that full community. So yeah. Susan, talk to us about that. I know you've had so many success stories in your area as well. What kind of things are you seeing with your participants?
Well, we're earlier in the journey with Bloomboard. We're only in year 2, but we already have a bilingual teacher who's asked to double up on her coursework, and the university partner has been acquiescent in that. And so she is flying through. She's determined to be done, and she's going to be staffing one of our bilingual classrooms. We just opened an early childhood center. We have the Bloomboard candidate who is very quickly going to be taking over one of our early childhood classes. So it's just the momentum, I think, is a takeaway that I have. And we're already starting to think differently about how we're thinking about the next few years. For example, the principal from the high school just contacted me last week and said that she had identified a set of twins who are doing dual credit. They're seniors, they're doing dual credit at the local community college. They're both interested in education. And right away, and she was like, don't you have a program that's more like an apprenticeship program for teaching? And I was like, yes, we do. And so now we're starting to think about getting kids into a Bloomboard type pathway right out of high school. They can get their bachelor's degree in 3 years without ever leaving home. And that's not the right fit for all kids. Some kids want to have that go away to college experience, but other kids really want to not leave home. They're caring for family members or they need to work at the same time. And so this just gives a different kind of college degree opportunity for even our new graduating seniors.
Yeah, Susan, I was just going to ask you and Shannon both, if this is shifting a little bit of how you're thinking as an HR leader and how you're creating those pathways. And you just said something that we have heard multiple times that, not only does this could be a pathway for your high school graduates, whether you have a high school or even some of our districts that are elementary districts are creating those partnerships with their high school districts to have the opportunity for high school students to come back down and be a part of teaching in the elementary districts where they are near. But thinking about that, could you imagine being a first year teacher and from day one of your bachelor program, you're in classrooms working with students and how that shifts your difference. Shannon, you talked about your high school special education teacher feeling so prepared and being on top of that as a first year teacher, because you've both mentioned, we struggle to get them in, but we also struggle to keep them because those first 3 years are so hard when you're finally working with students. But in this program, our bachelor students work for 3 years from day one with students, gathering artifacts, getting feedback on those video clips and on their lesson planning. And so they're actually having classroom experiences. So when you get a first year teacher, you actually have a teacher that's been teaching in schools for 3 years, right? And so having that experience. So we're hopeful in what we're hearing across the board is that they're not just there and they're going to stay because they've signed a contract, but hopefully they're going to stay because they love it and they're seeing success earlier than some of our other, graduates. It's for us, it's always been for me, especially as a veteran teacher myself, that we want not just a student in a classroom, but we want someone who's going to be there and stay and have that commitment and that success. So excellent. Well, looking ahead in the next 5 years or so, what is, kind of the success of this program look like for you as you're thinking about how your strategy is and how you're funding things? What are some goals that you have for your program moving forward, or how you might be thinking differently about staffing because of that? Shannon, go ahead.
I guess for me, it's being more intentional about like getting something in place like a 3-year retirement incentive, right? So that we can pre-plan for those retirements and maybe what our needs will be. Because we know the success is there with Bloomboard and we know how to work the program and we've got, like I said, all the things that can surround it. So it's being more intentional on the front end to be really looking at, let's do a 3-year incentive program for like for teacher retirement. And that we can get those things going. They get a little bump in pay, a reward for letting us know, and then we can plan more strategically around that. And then also just doing a better job of not only providing professional development like the tuition reimbursement, but providing other PD opportunities. We've really taken that on as a district where we have like a summer PD program and they get paid a little stipend to come to different trainings, but doing that for our non-certified staff, right? So that we can I don't know every single person like the way I want to. I typically only get to deal with people that are an issue, right? So it's having that kind of more proactive approach where I'm getting to meet them, know them on a different level, and really know who's like interested in doing something different, or what are they interested in? Do we have people that, aren't working in special education that maybe they would have a heart for that, and that would be something that we could work on. So it's just really thinking more strategically about how we do that going forward to anticipate those openings and figure out ahead of time.
We actually had an example in Fremont, Illinois, where a small district there, like we really only have one or two spots that we can put someone here, but they knew they had their one middle school science teacher was going to retire in 2 years, and they knew there was no one that they can never get science teachers in their rural area. But they found out through doing an initial survey that they had a teacher who would love to be a pair that would love to be a middle school science teacher. And to your point, Shannon, they had no idea that, like, we didn't even know her. She does an amazing job. She just did she was in the special education department. We had no idea she had a background in science and would love to do that. And so through surveying this, it was a surprise to them. And they realized that because they knew that teacher would retire, that's who mentored her. And so for 2 years, she worked in that classroom. So when she graduated, she took over as the teacher of record in the classroom where she had done her whole work. So it was just a phenomenal transition for them. And they're like, this changes how we will plan going forward altogether. And so finding those folks who are interested, sometimes it surprises us. So Susan, how about you? Well, I know you mentioned a little bit of some of the things you're thinking of changing. How does this shape how you kind of move forward?
Well, we're still looking to see how our 30 grower own are going to pan out, but what it's doing for me is shifting the way I think about teacher training and preparation in general. I think teacher apprenticeship is a no-brainer. My husband's in the medical field. He did a 6-year residency. 6 years. And yet we take new teachers coming straight out of university who've just spent like a handful of weeks in the classroom, with various layers of supervision, and then we just throw them into the classroom, and then we're shocked when they struggle, especially post-pandemic, with kids who can't self-regulate, or who have attention deficit issues. And so I just think an apprenticeship program for teachers is a long time needed, long time in coming. And I guess I'm going to struggle to put this into words a little bit. Like, I went to a prestigious university, like with air quotes around it. And I have 4 kids and they're going to prestigious universities. And like, at some level, that's kind of dumb. But people who do that, people who go away to college and are investing a lot of money in a 4-year degree, and they're living on campus and they're doing that traditional experience, they're often steered away from an education degree because people in their family or people that they know in the workforce tell them, well, why would you just be a teacher? You're never gonna pay off your student loans. It's, you need to pursue this kind of big salary. And some of that is just socially constructed and empty and meaning. But the flip side of that is we have a ripe field of people right here in our community who for various reasons have chosen not to go away to a 4-year degree program. And they are going to be amazing role models and teachers and guides for the young people here in our community. And I just think it was right here in front of my eyes and I wasn't even paying attention to it. And so that's been a big mind shift for me that working with Bloom Board has done for me.
I really appreciate you sharing that aspect too, Susan. I think, I went through a very traditional teacher preparation program myself, as a very prestigious university, and left, feeling really well prepared until I went into the classroom for a couple of years and realized, I hadn't had as many opportunities as I had wished I had. And I know one of the goals in many districts across the nation is looking at our teacher population and realizing it does not match our communities, right? Our teacher population looks like me, and that is not what our communities look like. And so knowing that we have this opportunity to really shift what we're doing in our schools and how we're thinking about the matches of our teaching population with our community and in our buildings and knowing that we have committed individuals that maybe for whatever reason within our school systems did not have the opportunity to go forward into that. And this creates that opportunity in a way that really allows them to invest back into themselves and in their communities. And then for that to be seen and modeled within our schools as well. And so I really appreciate you highlighting sort of that piece. So I know I could keep talking to you all forever, but I know that we're going to have some questions from our participants. So I want to ask you each one more question. And then that way we can get some questions from our audience as well. So for districts who might be considering approach similar to this, what's one piece of advice that you'd share about maybe getting started, or one thing that you might would be different if you had started again that you would want to highlight for them? So,
I have two pieces
Okay.
of advice. One is when you're building the sort of like selection process, I think in hindsight, it worked really well for us to have multiple points where the candidates had to be proactive and do some sort of next step action oriented on their end to keep themselves in the candidate pool. So whether it was self-scheduling into a meeting or attending an information session or coming to an interview or having a principal write a letter of recommendation, we had like 4 or 5 checkpoints. The people who just weren't going to be that invested or that much of a self-starter kind of just fell off, and it made the decision-making process very easy. So I would say definitely really think carefully about your candidate selection process and what that's going to look like. Because Shannon said this, we were the same way. At the very beginning, we were like, okay, just you want to be a teacher? Come on, get in this program with us. And we got lucky, but we did have a couple people in some of our other partner programs who really struggled, and it just wasn't a good fit for them. And they just needed a lot of handholding, and they're going to make it, but we could have done more work on the front end. So I would say really custom design your selection process. And number 2, investigate any kind of apprenticeship programs that may be in your state or community or your region, whether it's a government entity or a nonprofit kind of career pathway program. I didn't even understand that those things were out there, and they don't understand that teacher apprenticeship actually falls under their umbrella of support.
Thank you for that, Susan. Shannon.
I definitely echo what Susan said. I would have been more diligent in how I selected candidates and been more, judicious about that. I think the other thing for me, and I think that we're getting good at it now, is making sure you have something in place where you're supporting new teachers now, because you're gonna have, like, if you're having that turnover and you don't, all you're doing is like trying to stop a leak, right? And you're not gonna ever do that. You're just gonna keep leaking water. So you've got to figure out what it is that you're currently doing that you can improve, and that will make sure you're gonna support them afterwards. Like I said, our mentorship program, we've worked on that. We've actually tapped a teacher on the shoulder. She's one of our teacher leaders who we're hoping will become an administrative leader, but we have had her revamp our entire mentorship program. We just had a mentorship meeting yesterday. We had like 50 teacher mentors there. We have a tiered process. I mean, it's so extensive now. And it's because we took the time to take a look at it and know that it wasn't working. It wasn't doing what we needed it to do. And then that new teacher academy, those are 2 big game changers. And I feel like, they're going to be supportive. And we actually also did this with our new teacher program. We put anybody that was going to in Bloomboard, we went ahead and let them be part of the new teacher onboarding program, the academy. So they're getting supported from multiple ways. So it's just, if you're going to make the investment, make sure that you've got all the wraparound things to make it successful.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And I think, again, the more we can have our participants, or any participants in Grow Your Own programs, have that opportunity to be exposed to those opportunities that they'll have as first year teachers, to hear that, one of the things I love about our programs, that we specifically design them with our university partners. So these are not programs that we've tried to, kind of use an existing model, but all of our university partners co-develop these with Bloomboard, with the idea specifically of participants like yours in mind, knowing that they're working full time, that they're having that opportunity And so they have the opportunity to engage in that coursework, but it's also written in a way that allows them to do their assignments, to think about curriculum, to plan their lessons in the way that you do school in your district, right? So they're not having to use, these standards here or this curriculum here. No, go and look and find, what does your district use for a curriculum? What does a scope and sequence look like in your fourth grade ELA in your district? What does your reading curriculum look like? And then how can you learn about doing it in that way, right? That's what we want. We want to eliminate some of that first year, like, oh my gosh, this is completely different than I had before. And so the more you can build on those structures of support to connect that, the stronger, that first year experience will be. So absolutely. Well, I know that we have questions. I actually already have a question that someone sent over to me for you, Susan. So we can start there. And then I invite anybody that's on the call that might have a question from any of our participants to please feel free to drop it in the chat. And that way we can, ask any of those to our panelists that might be helpful. But the first one I have, Susan, is someone said that you mentioned that your 3-year grant was kind of going away, and that you started mentioning a little bit about how you're going to continue to fund that model. I know you mentioned apprenticeship funding, but have you figured out how you're going to kind of continue to, what are some other areas or pieces that you're considering to fund that when a grant, because a lot of us where we have some initial funding and maybe it will go, will change. So how might you continue to fund that after your grant goes away?
Frankly, I'm not 100% sure.
Okay.
So I'm
Yeah.
already starting that conversation with our leadership team and our board so that they see the investment potential. We can use some Title II. We're going to reallocate some of our local department funds. I'm going to braid together some funding from some other departments. Our equity department is really invested in having teachers who are more representative of our student population. So I think that they're going to be willing to invest in this project. So from now through June 30th until the next fiscal year, I'm going to be deciding exactly how many candidates we can sustain and how we're going to continue to fund it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And hopefully that layered on with that apprenticeship funding and that, kind of what that can be sustainable will, be able to continue to create that embedded model, as you had said, how many do we need each year as we think through, hopefully as you grow those pieces, what are those substructures? And Shannon, I know you mentioned one of the things that really kind of triggered my thought around that too, is doing some purposeful planning, right? So filling out those retirees, creating a culture where it's okay to share, hey, we might be moving next year. And this is what I'm thinking about, instead of there being a fear, but that way there you can, start to plan. Sometimes that can be really powerful. So.
And if you think about that, like I just want to add, if you think about that, if you're doing that pre-planning and you're having somebody retire, typically they're at the top of the scale, right? I mean, typically, not always. And so there's going to be cost savings associated with hiring a newbie. So you can use that cost savings to invest in them.
Yes.
And then it just makes sense.
I love that. So yes. That's such a good, purposeful way. So sometimes it's just having those conversations and thinking through, where can we pull those? So I think just being really thoughtful is what I always hear in conversations with our district partners, is how can we be more thoughtful about how we're utilizing our funds? So I know here in Arizona, we struggle that we don't have extra funds, right? The additional funding, there is no cherry on top, right? We're just trying to make the one scoop of ice cream here. And so how do we really think about what that base funding is and how we get creative about how we can utilize, just that basic funding. If anything else comes in, that's great. But what can we do to reallocate just that base level in a way that's really purposeful and impactful, instead of spinning our wheels, recruiting maybe people who won't stay. So really thoughtful work there. So Emily, I don't know if you see any other additional questions in the chat, or if anyone has sent anything specifically over to you. Do you have anything else for our panelists?
I do not have anything in the chat, but we do have a little bit of time. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to put it in the chat.
Come off mute if you want to. If you're here and it's easier for you to do that. If you're walking around somewhere, feel free to do that. I will also, while we're waiting for if anyone wants to do that, just turn it back over to Shannon and Susan, both of you. Is there anything we haven't asked you about that if we were sitting at a lunch table with us in person at this opportunity today, that you would want to share with folks on the call related to Bloomboard or not, as you've implemented and thought about this? Is there anything we haven't asked you about that you'd want to share out with folks?
I would share that we have bi-weekly check-ins with Bloomboard, and they tell us the exact progress of our candidates. And so we know we're not going to get blindsided if the candidates aren't keeping up. We can swoop in and offer support. And, as a parent with 3 kids in college right now, I don't see their grades. Like once they're over 18, you don't see anything. And so just being able to know that our candidates are on track on a regular basis has been a huge weight off my mind. And it also, as I'm going into these funding and budget conversations with our leadership team and our board, I can assure them that we know we're investing in the right people.
One of the things that's really important to us, as you mentioned, Shannon, that we hosted some of those learning sessions, so info sessions for participants. We try to be very transparent about the program and about the opportunities with them and any cost or anything like that from the very beginning. And we do share, as a part of the agreement that they're signing with the district, or the district paying for, a large portion, if not all of their tuition, that, there will be wraparound support. So that positive accountability on the district side and from the university side, and we do meet, as Susan mentioned, we meet with our district partners as Bloomboard supports these programs. We meet with our district partners frequently to talk about, sort of where should we be at this point in time? Is there anything that we're hearing that are a struggle, or anything that you are hearing? And then the other half of our time at Bloomboard is spent meeting and having similar conversations with our university and their faculty to see what are they seeing. Are they seeing a trend that's a struggle? Is there something that we might be able to put in levels of support or access for candidates to be able to be successful in their models? And so that full wraparound support model is just like we would want to do with students in our classrooms in the K-12 setting. We're trying to do for our participants so that they feel that support, because we don't want anyone to get so far along that it's a struggle for them to catch back up or to feel that they don't have that level of support. So I really appreciate that for sure. So excellent. Shannon, how about you? Anything that we haven't?
Susan and I are on the same page, because that's exactly what I was going to talk about. And the one thing I will say, for those of you who don't like meetings, they're very short and it's to the point, and they only take the amount of time that is needed, and they are wonderful with any resources, letters, reminders, all sorts of things. They give you templates, so they make it basically as easy as possible. But that's definitely very helpful. I enjoy knowing what's going on. I enjoy knowing about our investment and making sure that we're all on the same page.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that as well. And it's definitely our goal. I did see a question. So if Crystal, thank you for that. She asked if you're interested in learning more about a partnership, what are your best next steps? So Emily, I'm assuming that the recording or information might be shared out afterwards from this webinar. Is that right? Yes. And will there be contact information shared directly with that for them, or?
Not typically. I mean, if it's included in the presentation that Lucia shared with me, then it would be in that PowerPoint. But typically we don't post your contact information, Christy.
Perfect.
I can post in the chat our contact us form, or there's also our email address. And I can route that, whatever emails come through.
Excellent. That sounds wonderful. And yes, if you do go to our website at all at Bloomboard, you can definitely connect. We do usually work by state teams. You've heard Susan and Shannon both share sort of some state specific, funding opportunities and things like that. So we have amazing, our team that actually is very well educated in each of those states. You will have the opportunity to work and talk about specific certification pathways with them. So thank you for that question, Crystal. Super happy to have that. And I know we also have a lot of district friends in all of our different states who are happy to share, some of their state specific, conversations that they've had as well. So that's great. And I know one of the things to know is when you partner with us, you're paying tuition for your students. We come along for the ride with that. There's no cost to pay for Bloomboard consulting for us. It's really for our university and our district partners. We're all just really invested in them being successful. So you'll have a senior learning strategist like myself. You'll have someone on a Bloomboard team that also is your kind of a go-to-market or a salesperson that will help you really think through the cost in this and how you can allocate different funding and resources internally in the state. So they're the expert in that state funding structures to help support you. And you'll also have a program manager who does pull all of that data and has all of those pieces with you. So being able to support you in that, layered supports based on what your needs are as a district. You'll have that support all along from before you implement and as you're considering maybe even surveying your staff to see if anyone would even be interested, all the way through beyond certification and celebrating putting them in classrooms with you. So I have another question. How do we feel about international educators feeling some of the gaps in teaching and retention? So I will tell you that I'm going to turn that over to Susan and Shannon as one of our last questions, but I will tell you we do have quite a few international transcripted students in our programs. Our universities do work with them to pull their international transcripts and to support that. But I do know we also have some schools that support international educators that come in on different visas and things. So Shannon and Susan, anybody want to talk about, or do you utilize international students at all?
I've looked at it. I have been to a couple of seminars where information was presented. It's a little more difficult for a rural area. I've found I'm not opposed to it. It's just a lot more upfront costs and negotiating different things because lots of times you have to find housing and then
Yeah.
make sure that there's access to a bus system. So there's lots of little things that you got to think about. But I mean, I think it would be great to have that experience for our students. But it's just figuring that out and navigating it and having Bloomboard kind of do all that for me. I don't have time to do all of that. So maybe Bloomboard could think about doing that in the future. I don't know. Being
We
kind of
have-
that go-between. There's a lot of stuff to think about.
Yeah.
We have 8 international staff right now. Our Hispanic population is growing exponentially. We have a fabulous assistant superintendent of language and culture, and she runs point on this. So those details Shannon was talking about are real, but I don't have to think about them. They are not going to stay, like their visas are 3 years, and then they might, you can work to get an extension on their visa, but that is also very costly. There are organizations that are kind of doing that behind the scenes work for you. One of them that we work with is called GEC. I have mixed feelings about the support and the screening that they're doing on the back end. So I think that there's pros and cons.
Excellent. Thank you for that. We have maybe time for 1 or 2 more questions. Does anybody else have something they want to chime in and ask our friends? Right. I know, I understand that folks are heading to lunch, so we are going to let everybody head to lunch now. But Susan and Shannon, thank you so much for your thoughtful comments here and your planning in your district. I will tell you that I have spoken for educators from all of the different areas that we have, and this really not only has changed how we think about in our partner districts, that recruitment and the retention process, but also it has just changed so many lives in not only the students that we serve, but in our education support professional population. We know many of them are basically doing the job of our teachers. I know in my district, I put my most amazing education support professionals with, my grade levels that maybe didn't have phenomenal teachers at the time because I knew they were so good for kids. And so knowing that, this has given them an opportunity to serve and be compensated in a way that they can sustain an education profession role that they want to in your communities is just so amazing to me and life-changing. So thank you for your leadership. Thank you for being willing to share. I know that your gift of time is the greatest gift we all have. So those of you that are on, thank you for coming and listening and thinking about how you might be able to better serve your communities in this role. And Susan and Shannon, thank you so much for your partnership. So have a wonderful day, everyone. Thank you. Emily, thank you so much.
Thank you, Christy. So that's going to wrap up today's webinar. Again, thank you everyone for joining us for Solve Shortages for the Long-Term Funding and Retention Strategies that Work. Again, look for an email probably either later today or tomorrow with that recertification information. And again, the webinar has been recorded and will be available under the resources section of ASCA.org. So thank you all for sharing your time. Shannon, Susan, Christy, thank you for sharing your wisdom and your knowledge. And I hope you all have a fantastic end of your week.